I'll simply put up with it for a little while longer because Dad is leaving soon. You are terrible, Greg, aren't you? But lately, I might have only been considering his money value. I chanced to overhear a brother and his wife having an uncomfortable chat. I was in excruciating anguish, since my father's face appeared more dejected than before. My dad grabbed my hand and shook his head when I reached for the doorknob to interrupt him as I stood next to him, unable to keep quiet. Don't be concerned. I need assistance with just one thing, he stated. I was shocked by the unexpected action he was thinking of taking against my brother and his wife. My name is Susan Owen. I manage reception and other tasks at a nearby osteopathic clinic at the age of 58. Robert and I have a daughter who is 28 years old, and we are the same age. After battling to conceive, we got married at the age of 25, and after fertility treatments, our daughter was born at the age of 30. She recently moved out of the house after deciding to get married. My daughter's marriage makes me joyful, even if I occasionally feel lonely because I'm used to living with 3 people. I've always wished to live in peace and avoid confrontations, but certain people were endangering that wish. Greg, my brother, is aggressive, which is the exact opposite of his nature. I haven't liked his mischievous behavior since I was a kid. He purposefully stuck insects I didn't like on me as a child and destroyed a plush toy I was attached to. The moment he released one of my treasured goldfish into a river stands out in particular. There were a lot of tears back then, and I still remember it. Greg and I had far less involvement as he grew up and moved out on his own, which I was glad of. I had wanted to avoid touch with him as much as possible. Surprisingly, however, Robert and Greg shared a workplace. I knew Robert was working for the same business as Greg when he was hired, but I purposely kept this from Robert because they were in different divisions, and I wanted to keep my relationship with Greg as low-key as possible. Like me, Robert detested war and was a pacifist. His parents were really fond of his sweet disposition. We had already met both families, had been dating since college, and had always considered getting married. Our lives settled, and we made the decision to be married when Robert took on a big assignment at work, succeeded, and was promoted without incident. Greg brought Kate, the lady he intended to marry, around that time, and she started to interfere with my tranquil existence. The doorbell rang one day when we were lounging on the couch at home. I'm back, and I've brought her with me. I met Kate and her personality for the first time at that precise moment. It was like my brother's, but very different from mine. Greg's classmate, Kate, was 2 years my senior, had light brown hair, and wore gaudy makeup that betrayed her restlessness. Despite the fact that one shouldn't make snap judgments based solely on appearance, I couldn't help but notice that our perspectives were different as soon as I laid eyes on her. It's good to meet you. I'm Susan, Greg's sister. I hope that we will get along. When I greeted her, Kate gave me a chilly look and remarked, "Oh, you're Susan?" The fact that we are getting married at the same time is problematic. Well, it's impossible to avoid anticipating it. Her speech pattern made me uneasy a little bit. I had already talked to our parents about our long-term marriage plans, but it still irritated me to be addressed in this way. However, since it was our first meeting, I suppressed my feelings. You're correct, Kate. Kindness toward our daughter would make me happy. My father, who had been a respected pediatrician in this area for many years, instantly followed up, saying, "Let's all get along and live peacefully." I have never met someone who doesn't like my father. He is always smiling, kind, and warm-hearted. I fought a turbulent existence akin to a TB. Drama because I grew up witnessing my parents and wanted a steady life. I had a negative vibe when I met Kate. After our marriage, Greg and I were living peacefully. But a sudden incident changed everything. It was Robert's promotion. Greg was older and had been at the company longer than Robert, but Robert was promoted and became Greg's direct supervisor. This company didn't follow the typical seniority system. It adopted a meritocracy. Robert's work was very meticulous, and he responded precisely where needed. From his capabilities, he was deeply trusted and valued by both upper management and colleagues. His promotion was decided without a single objection following the success of a major project he undertook before our marriage. An old colleague of mine, who works at the same place, occasionally gives me inside information. When my father invited us home to celebrate Robert's promotion, he didn't inform Greg, considering his feelings. But Greg saw our car and came to our home because he lived nearby. "What are you doing, Dad? Excluding us and preparing a luxurious meal? Do you prioritize your son-in-law over your own son?" They really were. It's unforgivable how they're treating you, Greg, so poorly when you're already down about not getting a promotion. The two vented their illogical anger. The celebration was supposed to start in a cheerful atmosphere, but it was ruined by this sudden event. It's not like that. Greg is important too, but Robert is already my son. It's natural to celebrate good news. If you're upset, I apologize, my innocent father said. Dad, don't apologize. Greg, my promotion is also thanks to everyone's support. How about we skip the celebration tonight and just enjoy the delicious food? When Robert suggested this, the two reluctantly sat down and enjoyed the meal together. After dinner, while relaxing in the living room, we told my father about our fertility treatment. I see. Actually, we were also blessed with you and Greg through fertility treatment, my father revealed. I was astonished by this new fact. Really? I had no idea. Was the process difficult? It was tough for Mom. There wasn't much I could do, my father replied. What are you talking about? It was because of Dad's cooperation that we could have children, my mother interjected affectionately. This comforting exchange was motivating. Knowing there were successful examples of fertility treatment around us encouraged us to keep trying. However, Greg and Kate, who were upstairs, came down and interrupted with a disdainful tone. What? Susan is receiving fertility treatment, Kate sneered. Afterward, she whispered something to Greg and then announced, Actually, I was going to wait until the second trimester, but I'm pregnant. The sudden confession of pregnancy surprised everyone. Ah, is that so? That is truly something to celebrate, my father said warmly. Really? I stammered, shocked by the announcement. Still, I managed to say, Please take care of your health. Congratulations on your pregnancy. I expressed my joy sincerely, but Kate's face looked displeased, as if she was unconvinced. Knowing that I was undergoing fertility treatment, I suspected she might have intentionally announced her pregnancy at this moment. Despite her timing, I genuinely congratulated her. Later, Greg and Kate had a daughter, and we continued our efforts with fertility treatments. After 3 years of treatment, we finally had a daughter. It was our last in vitro fertilization attempt after we had decided to live just the two of us. Our daughter joined our family, bringing immense joy. During the treatment, Robert suggested I quit my job due to the commuting and emotional burdens, so I stayed at home as a housewife. This allowed me to avoid conversations with Kate that might contain sarcasm, minimizing contact with her as much as possible. With the birth of our daughter, my feelings changed, and visits to my parents' home began to increase again. "Hey, Susan, your child has such small eyes that it's a bit pitiful." "Oh, but both of you have small eyes too, right?" The first comment Kate made upon meeting my daughter was characteristically inconsiderate. At that moment, I strongly felt again that I wanted to avoid any relationship with her. Kate always seemed to want to make herself look superior. "Don't worry about it. Don't worry. I'm not bothered," I said, maintaining a calm demeanor, thanks to my mother's consoling words. "Mother, can I take this rice home?" Kate asked suddenly. "Oh, I just bought new rice." My mother hesitated. "Don't be so stingy. We're out of rice at home, haha." Before my mother could agree, Kate had already taken the bag of rice and left the house. According to my troubled mother, Kate visited several times a week and took away groceries and daily necessities without permission. I was only surprised by Kate's unreasonable behavior. Amidst these daily events, I received news from my mother that my father had suddenly collapsed. He was still active as a doctor, working hard every day for his patients despite his age. I rushed to the hospital to suggest retirement, but when I arrived, he was as energetic as ever. I was momentarily confused, but quickly relieved. However, before I could relax, my mother started talking. "Susan, actually, your father has cancer." "What? Cancer? He just got brought in. How can you know that so soon?" I asked, bewildered. "We've actually been hiding it. He's had cancer for a while," my mother admitted. I was speechless at this shocking revelation. "Dad, did you know about the cancer?" I asked him directly. "As a doctor, yes. But by the time I noticed, it was too late. I'd probably have around 3 months left," he said calmly. Normally cheerful and optimistic, my father seemed slightly somber that day. "Dad, why didn't you tell us sooner?" I asked tearfully. "I wanted to minimize the time you all would be sad. I'm really sorry," he said regretfully. "I want to spend my final days at home. It might be a bother, but is that okay?" he asked. "Of course, Dad. I want to be with you too. I'll discuss it with Robert and come back home," I assured him. Thus, I decided to spend some time at my parents' home, staying by their side. My daughter, living 2 hours away by train, visited several times to see my father, which greatly pleased him. Robert, amidst his busy work schedule, helped greatly by shopping and keeping my father company. I shared this situation with Greg and Kate, but after previously visiting often, they completely stopped showing up. A few days later, my father invited both our family and Greg's family to the house. "I'm sorry, but there's something about the inheritance I need to discuss," my father said. Greg and Kate's eyes lit up. "In fact, my assets are about $5 million. Everyone except for my mother was shocked by the unexpected amount. Further inquiry revealed that in addition to his income as a doctor, my father had built up a considerable amount through stock investments. "I want to carefully consider this matter until my time comes and make a final decision. I'd appreciate your cooperation," he said. "Of course, Dad," Greg replied quickly. Greg, who hadn't even shown his face during the visits, responded enthusiastically. I could barely contain my anger. "Father, aren't you in pain? Maybe you should lie down for a bit," Kate said, beginning to ingratiate herself with the situation. Afterward, the couple visited my father daily, changing sheets, replenishing medicines, and acting devotedly. While feeling uncomfortable with their changed attitude, I remained silent as my father was pleased. One day, As my parents and I returned from the hospital, someone was in the living room. Looking at the shoes, I realized they belonged to Greg and Kate. Without paying much attention, I headed to the living room with my father and overheard my brother and his wife's conversation. $5 million is incredible. Dad will be gone soon, so let's just endure it for a while longer. You are terrible, Greg, aren't you? Although lately, I may have been viewing him solely in terms of financial worth. But I heard he only had 3 months left, and he still seems healthy. I wonder how long we'll need to care for him. My brother and his wife were having a discomforting conversation. Seeing my father's sad face next to me caused me pain. Unable to remain silent upon seeing him like this, I was about to head to the living room when he grabbed my hand and shook his head. Don't worry. There's just one thing I need help with, my father said. The next day, Greg and Kate came to visit my father again and started various caregiving tasks. You both must be busy. There's no need to come anymore. But Dad, considering all that you've done for us, we want to repay you, Kate insisted. Even though they may have seemed like a family on the surface, Greg was only thinking about money. Father's face was clearly lonely. I really was given 3 months to live, but it's been 4 months now. You must be eager for the inheritance, Father said. Greg and Kate seemed surprised by his words. Oh, Father, that's not true at all. If possible, we want you to live longer, Kate quickly countered. Maybe. Were you eavesdropping on our conversation yesterday? Father asked. What conversation? Were you saying something bad? From a lonely expression, Father laughed as if to tease. Watching the two of them become active and hurried was indescribably interesting. The following day, Robert left work early to join us for dinner at our house. Hello, Father. I brought some delicious-looking grapes. Let's chill and enjoy them later. Oh, what magnificent fruits. Can't wait to eat them. Thanks. Father seemed very pleased with Robert's visit. Robert quickly helped prepare dinner, and we all sat down at the table. Then Robert broached the subject. I heard that Greg quit his job. Did you hear anything? We were surprised by his question and couldn't answer. It seems like it was more that he was fired than him quitting on his own, Robert clarified. Really? What happened? It became clear that Greg's work performance had been deteriorating, and he had been frequently reprimanded. Moreover, recently, his behavior worsened, and after angering a client, he had a big argument with his direct supervisor, which ultimately led to his resignation. That recently is actually after I mentioned the inheritance. That timing might match up. Yes, it's a shame he caused trouble for the company, Robert added. That child used to be such a good boy, but somehow he changed, Father said sadly. Father's face had been filled with sadness recently, and it was very hard to see. Sorry to bring this up. The delicious food will get cold. Robert, really, thank you. We are so happy you joined our family, Father said. At those words, Robert nodded with a smile. All right, I've made up my mind. I need everyone's cooperation, Father declared. With that, he stood up, leaning on his cane, and handed over something. When we saw the contents of the envelope, we were surprised by Father's explanation. We agreed to the plan and promised to cooperate. 2 weeks later, Father passed away, watched over by Mother, me, and Robert. We couldn't get in touch with Greg and Kate, and they were absent during that crucial moment. Father's death brought deep sadness, but we were grateful to have spent his last days together. Father had posted the funeral notice at the hospital where he worked. On the day of the funeral, many people whom Father had cared for gathered. we realized how much father was loved by many. After settling down post-funeral, the topic of the inheritance came up. Right after father's death, Greg immediately brought up the topic of the estate. "Greg, father just passed away, and you're talking about this?" I asked. "Everyone grieves differently, but it's hard for me, having lost my husband," Mother said. "But we need to hurry with the estate matters," Kate interrupted. I was disappointed by Kate's lack of understanding of my mother's feelings. If only they would just keep quiet. Really terrible people. After living so long, they haven't learned anything. It was rare for Robert to raise his voice in anger. They were surprised by his reaction. "Neither of you deserves to receive his inheritance," Robert said firmly. Greg retorted with a flushed face. "What? You earn a high salary. You don't need the inheritance." "Calm down, Greg. We have a trip to Hawaii next week. For now, let's just split the $5 million inheritance," Kate said angrily. With that, Kate, looking furious, took Greg and went home. I can't believe those two, planning a trip to Hawaii at a time like this, I said, shaking my head. It's rare for Robert to get so angry. "Thank you," my mother said, embarrassed. "I regret how I raised him. Even at this age, I'm saddened that I have to cause my mother distress." "But don't worry," Robert reassured her. "Those two will have hell to come." Before they left for Hawaii, Greg and Kate handed over their bank details, instructing us to transfer the inheritance there. A few days later, while my mother and I were clearing up father's belongings, they returned. "Hawaii was really wonderful. Here, a souvenir for you," they said, handing over a can of macadamia nuts. Accepting the souvenir, I thought, better than nothing. "How's the inheritance?" "We'd like our bank card back," they demanded. I handed them the bank card. "Ha, I can't see the money in the account." "What do you mean?" "It hasn't increased since we withdrew money before the trip," they protested. "Hadn't you divided the inheritance yet?" they asked. "It's divided. Look properly. There should be $1,000 in each of your accounts," I replied. "Hey, Mom, what's this about $1,000? They reacted mockingly, but my mother and I remained calm. "This date, it's from before Father passed, isn't it?" they pointed out. "That's right. The distribution of the inheritance is already complete," I explained. As they looked surprised, I showed them Father's will. In the will, the majority of the estate was left to my mother and me, $500,000 each. Greg received only $11,000, and the rest was donated to pediatric medicine. "What is this? This isn't what we agreed on." Greg exploded in anger. "Hey, brother, did Father ever ask you to sign any special documents?" "Yes, I did sign. Dad said he was leaving me $5 million. "Really? Did you actually check what that document was about?" "It's just like you, signing without reading anything," I teased him with a laugh. "That document was a deed of renunciation of the inheritance. By signing it, you ended up getting nothing." "What? That's too harsh," Greg exclaimed, shocked and pale. "At that time, Dad did tell you to check the contents carefully, but you just assumed it was about receiving $5 million and signed without verifying." Hearing this, Greg was shocked and lost all color in his face. Next to him, Kate was causing a commotion. "I quit my job thinking I was going to receive $5 million, and I've already spent all my savings. Greg is an important son to his mother, so you will at least give us $100,000, right?" Kate pleaded desperately with my mother. "I'm sorry, But that's impossible. I can't give a single penny to people who only see money. But $1,000 was his last act of kindness. Use it wisely, my mother said, holding back tears before leaving the scene. What are we going to do now, Greg? Kate wailed, making a fuss. Greg just stood there dazed. Look, give me half of your $500,000, Kate demanded. There's no way I can do that. You've always belittled our family. You've even taken daily necessities and food from Mom. I'm done dealing with you. Normally quiet, I exploded with anger and shouted loudly. Now, if you understand, leave immediately and never come back to this house. Unable to argue, the astonished brother and sister-in-law were driven out of the house, and I firmly locked the front door. Feeling a definitive sense of closure, I moved on. As a result, following the will, my brother and sister-in-law were left with only $11,000. Greg, having quit his job and lost his income to support the household, struggled to make even the small mortgage payments. Eventually, they lost their home and had to move. Despite several visits to our family home, my once angry mother never forgave their actions. Local rumors suggest that they sought financial help from their daughter, but she, knowing all the details, denied their requests and turned them away. As a result, my brother and sister-in-law, now discredited by everyone, live in a small apartment with a rent of $300 per month, barely getting by with day labor. A friend of Robert reported seeing them at the market, looking terribly emaciated, pale, and lifeless, much like a spent candle. On the other hand, I used the inheritance from my father to carry out a major renovation of the aging family home. Several years ago, I started a new life with my mother. We redesigned every room to be barrier-free to ensure that my elderly mother could live without any difficulties, creating a safe and comfortable environment. Most surprisingly and joyfully, my daughter gave birth to a healthy baby boy, my first grandchild. My mother was overjoyed to see her great-grandchild. Recently, we have found great joy in playing with my grandson in the park. After years of hoping, a peaceful and calm life has finally become a reality. From now on, I sincerely hope to spend relaxed and fulfilling days with my precious family and friends.